A fist came down on the hood of a truck. The metal buckled under it. 3 men went quiet mid-laugh. A woman in a red dress stood frozen by the office door, one hand pressed to her chest. Nobody moved. The man who threw that punch turned slow, and every man in that yard felt the temperature drop. One of the 3 men slowly stepped back from her. His knuckles were split. His jaw was locked. Then came the question, low and mean. "Who are you dressing up for?" That was Cole Vaughn, president of the local Hells Angels chapter, and in 20 years nobody had heard that crack in his voice. The woman said nothing. She just reached into her purse and set a single dog tag on the desk. What that little piece of metal meant would break Cole Vaughn in half. Stay with me on this one. Let me take you back a couple of hours to before that punch ever landed. Barstow, California, summer of 1979. The kind of heat that comes up off the asphalt and sits on your chest like a hand. Out on the edge of town there was a garage. Vaughn's Custom and Repair. A long cinder block building with 3 bay doors, a gravel yard, and a sign out front faded almost white in the sun. That garage was legitimate, every bolt of it. It fixed trucks, rebuilt engines, and paid its taxes on time. But everybody in Barstow knew who really owned it. His name was Cole Vaughn, and the patch on the back of his cut said Hells Angels, and the word stitched under his name said President. They called him Ironclad. 20 years in the club. He was built like a man put together out of spare parts. Big through the shoulders, thick neck. Gray coming into a beard he never bothered to trim. And here's the thing about Cole. He never yelled. He never had to. When Cole Vaughn wanted the yard went quiet. He'd break up a bar fight just by standing in the doorway. He'd settle a debt between 2 hotheads with a single sentence and a long look. That was the kind of pull he had. Not the kind you buy. The kind you earn by never once flinching. Now here's what you need to understand about that garage. It had a front office. And in that office, for 2 years straight, sat a woman named Della Hartwell. Della was the office manager. She kept the books, answered the phone, chased down customers who didn't pay. She was a widow, somewhere in her 40s, full-figured, soft in the voice, dark hair pinned up. And she dressed plain, believe me, long sleeves even in that heat, buttoned all the way up. She kept her eyes on her ledgers, and she never once sat out in the yard with the men. That was no accident, that was a rule, Cole's rule. See, Cole had men in that crew who were not gentle people. Bikers who'd done time. Men with tempers and appetites and no reason left to hide either one. And 2 years back, when Della first walked in looking for work, Cole took one look at that crew and made a law right there on the spot. Nobody talks to Della unless it's about a work order. Nobody stands too close. Nobody so much as whistles. You want to keep your patch, you keep your distance. The men grumbled about it. Of course they did. 3 of them in particular never let it go. A big one named Tuck, heavy through the gut, mean when he drank. A wiry one they called Snake, all elbows and bad grins. And a third with a shaved head who never said much, which somehow made him the one to watch. Those 3 chewed on that rule for 2 years like a bone that wouldn't crack. Why does the old man get to lock her away, they'd mutter, when he never so much as touches her himself? What's she to him? They never got an answer. Nobody did, because Cole never explained his laws. He just laid them down and let them stand. But they followed the rule because the one thing you did not do was cross Ironclad Vaughn. So for 2 years Della Hartwell worked 10 feet from the roughest crew in the high desert, and not one of them ever laid a finger on her. Cole saw to that. He walked her to her car every night. He'd wait, hands in his pockets, until her taillights turned onto the highway before he went back inside. He guarded that woman like she was made of glass, and he never once told her why. And she never once asked. There was one more thing those 2 shared. A dog. A brown mutt with one torn ear that showed up at the garage one night half-starved and never left. Diesel, the men called him. Every evening after the crew rolled out, Cole would set a bowl of scraps by the back step. And every evening, whether she knew Cole was watching or not, Della would already be out there, kneeling in the gravel in her plain clothes, feeding that same dog by hand. Two people who couldn't say a soft word to each other, saying it to a dog instead. And neither one ever mentioned it in the daylight. So that was the shape of things. A hard man, a quiet woman, and a dog nobody owned. 2 years of it, steady as the heat. Then came that morning, hottest day of the year so far. The men were out in the yard by 7, tearing down a transmission, passing a thermos, cracking the kind of jokes men crack when it's too hot to work. Cole was under a truck with a wrench in his hand, greased to the elbow, half an ear on his crew. And a car pulled into the gravel, Della's car. She got out, and every man in that yard turned to stone, because Della Hartwell was not buttoned up that morning. She was not in her long sleeves and her pinned-up hair. She was wearing a fitted crimson dress. Bright red, cut close, the kind of dress that turns a room. Her hair was down around her shoulders. She had lipstick on, and she walked across that gravel like a woman who had somewhere important to be and no time to explain it to anybody. Now understand, in 2 years, not one of those men had ever seen her look like anything but the quiet lady with the ledgers. And now here she came, in that red dress in that heat, and every rule Cole had built started to crack right down the middle. The thermos stopped moving. The jokes died in the air. And that old buried grudge, the one those 3 men had been chewing for 2 years, came right up to the surface all at once. 3 of them peeled off from the transmission. Slow, grinning, Tuck and Snake and the shaved-head one. They drifted toward her the way wolves drift toward something that stopped moving. Not fast, just closing the circle. 2 years of being told no, and here was the no walking across the gravel in a red dress, looking, to their small, ugly minds, like a yes. "Well, look at this," Tuck said. "Somebody woke up beautiful." Della kept walking toward the office door. She didn't answer. She didn't slow down. Snake slid into her path, easy, casual, like a man who had all day. "Where you off to, sweetheart, all dressed like that? You can't just walk by us looking like Christmas morning." She stopped. One hand tightened on her purse. "Please move," she said, quiet, steady, not scared. That was the thing, she wasn't scared. She was somewhere else entirely, and these 3 fools were in the way of it. The shaved-head one laughed low and put his hand flat on the office door, holding it shut. "Come on now, who's the lucky fella? 2 years you sit in there like a nun, and today you come in dressed for a man. So who is he? He know what he's got." And that's when Della's face changed. Just a flicker. Something behind the eyes went cold and far away, and she said, almost to herself, "You have no idea what today is." They didn't hear it, or they didn't care. Tuck reached out and caught a piece of her sleeve just to tug it, just to be a pig about it. "Don't be shy, honey. Give us a spin. 2 years we've been good boys. Let's have a look." Now here's where it turned. Under that truck, Cole Vaughn heard the word honey. He heard the tone. He heard his crew crowding a woman he'd spent 2 years keeping them off of. And something in him that had been wound tight for a very long time finally snapped clean through. He came out from under that truck fast for a big man. Too fast. The wrench was still in his hand. He crossed that yard in 6 long strides, and the 3 of them scattered back from Della like startled birds, because they knew that face, and that face meant somebody was about to bleed. Cole didn't hit them. Not yet. He hit the truck instead. He brought his fist down on the hood so hard it left a dent the size of a dinner plate, and the crash of it echoed off the cinder block and rolled out across the whole yard. The men went dead silent. Della went white. Diesel, dozing in the shade, scrambled up on his feet, and Cole turned to face her. Not the men. Her. That was the wrong choice, and part of him knew it even then. His men had crowded her. His men had grabbed her sleeve. And instead of turning on his men, Cole Vaughn turned on the woman, because the thing burning in his chest wasn't clean anger. It was the sight of Della Hartwell dressed up beautiful for the whole world, and the certainty, sudden and sick, that it wasn't for him. "Who is he?" Cole said. She stared at him. "Cole." 2 years. His voice was low and it shook. 2 years you dress like the plainest woman in California, and today you come in painted up like that. So I'll ask you one time, who are you dressing up for? The yard held its breath, because you did not talk to Della that way. Cole had built a whole law against talking to Della that way, and now here he was breaking it himself in front of everyone, ugly and jealous and loud. The 3 men who'd started it stood frozen in the gravel, and it dawned on them slow that they were watching something they'd cracked open by accident and had no idea how to close. And Della Hartwell did something nobody expected. She didn't cry. She didn't run. She didn't fire back. She just went completely, terribly still. She looked at Cole for a long moment, and the hurt in her eyes slowly turned into something harder and sadder than hurt. Then she walked past him, into the office. And Cole followed because he had to, because he'd started this and there was no walking it back. She set her purse on the desk, she opened it, and she took out something small on a beaded chain and she set it down on the wood between them. A dog tag, old, army issue, dented on one corner and worn smooth from years of somebody's thumb. "You want to know who I got dressed up for?" she said. "Read it." And right then, Diesel padded in through the open door and lay down between the two of them, the way he did every single night, and for a second nothing in that office moved at all. Cole looked at the tag. He didn't touch it. He was still riding that hot, ugly wave, still sure he was about to see some other man's name. He almost didn't pick it up. He wanted to be right about it. It's a strange thing, but a jealous man would rather be right and wrecked than wrong and saved. But he did pick it up, and the whole world went quiet, because the name stamped into that little piece of metal was not a stranger's name. It was a name Cole Vaughn had spent 10 years trying not to say out loud. Hartwell, Raymond E. The room tilted. Cole's thumb moved over those letters the way you touch something you can't believe is real. Ray Hartwell. "No," he said, "just that, no." Della watched his face fall apart. "Yes," she said softly, "Ray was my husband, Cole. The man in the photograph you've never once looked at. The one I keep on my desk in the frame, 10 years today. That's what today is. Today's the day I lost him." Cole set the tag down like it had burned him. His hands weren't steady anymore. A minute ago this was about pride, about a dress, about a jealous man and a woman he couldn't have. Now it was something else, reaching back through 10 years and a whole ocean, and Cole could feel the ground going out from under him. "That's not possible," he said. "Ray Hartwell wasn't married. Ray never," he stopped. "How do you have his tag?" "Because I'm his wife." Della's voice cracked for the first time. "We married 3 weeks before he shipped out. A courthouse and 2 witnesses off the street. Nobody in his unit ever met me. He kept my picture in his helmet. He talked about coming home to me every single day, from everything I was ever told." She pressed her lips together. "By the men who came home, the men who didn't get to." And there it was, the thing that changed everything. Whatever jealous story Cole had built in his head about some other man, it was gone now, burned to nothing. This wasn't about a rival. It never had been. The woman he'd guarded for 2 years was the widow of the one man Cole owed his whole life to, and Cole hadn't known. He hadn't let himself look at the photo. He hadn't let himself ask a single real question. He'd kept her safe and kept her at arm's length and kept his own heart shut tight. And the whole time the truth had been sitting 10 feet away in a little frame on her desk. If this story is already getting to you, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. It genuinely helps these stories reach more people, and it's about to get harder to sit still. Now let's get back to it. Because here's the part Cole hadn't figured out yet. He was still thinking this was a terrible coincidence. 2 years of Della sitting in his office, and it just happened to be Ray's widow. He was still thinking the world had played some cruel joke on them both. She hadn't. There was no joke. There was a plan, 10 years in the making, and he was standing in the middle of it. "Della," he said slowly, "how did you end up here in Barstow, in my garage, of all the places?" And Della Hartwell looked at him with 10 years behind her eyes and said the thing that took the last of the floor out from under him. "You think I found this place by accident?" She almost laughed, but there was no joy in it. "Cole, I came looking for you. I've known who you were since before I ever saw your face. I didn't need this job. I had a life back east, a small one but mine. I took this job so I could be near you." Cole sat down hard in the office chair. It was the only thing keeping him up. "Why," he said, "in God's name, why would you want to be near me?" "Because of what Ray asked me to do," she said, "and because of what you did, or what you never did. Sit down and shut up, Cole Vaughn, and for once in your life, listen. You've owed me this listen for 2 years, and I've waited long enough." He listened. Della pulled the framed photograph off the desk and set it in front of him. And for the first time in 2 years, Cole made himself really look at it. A young soldier, grinning, arms slung around another young soldier. And that second man, thinner, darker-haired, but unmistakable, was Cole himself. 22 years old, alive in a way he hadn't been in a decade. "That's you," Della said, "standing next to my husband. You've had that photo in your eyeline for 2 years and you never once looked, did you? You couldn't. It hurt too much. Every morning you walked past the man you used to be and you kept your eyes on the floor." Cole's eyes had gone wet and he didn't fight it. "Where'd you get this?" "The army sent it back with his things," she said, "along with his tag, and a letter he'd started to me and never finished." She sat down across from him, smoothing that crimson dress over her knees. "You want to know why I wore this today? Ray loved me in red. The night he proposed, I was wearing a red dress, borrowed from a girl I worked with because I didn't own one. He called me his girl in red for the whole 3 weeks we had. So once a year, on the day I lost him, I put on red and I go sit at his memorial and I talk to him for an hour. I tell him about the year. I tell him I'm all right. That's who I got dressed up for, Cole, my dead husband. Not one single soul in that yard. Not you." Cole put his face in his hands. "Now," she said, and her voice went quieter, gentler, and somehow that was worse. "Let me tell you about the day Ray died. Because I think you've been carrying a story about it for 10 years. And I need you to hear the truth from the woman who read the report 100 times till she knew it by heart." She reached across and took the dog tag off the desk and held it in her fist. "There was a fire," she said. "A truck rolled over a mine and it went up and there were 2 men trapped inside. You were one of them. Ray was already out. He was safe. He was clear. He could have run and nobody on this earth would have blamed him. Not me, not God, not one soul." Her voice was shaking now, but she pushed through it. "And instead, Raymond Hartwell turned around and went back into that fire and pulled Cole Vaughn out by the collar. He got you clear. He set you down in the dirt, and then the second blast came, and it got him, and it did not get you." She opened her hand and looked at the tag. "You lived because my husband decided you were worth dying for. That's the truth, Cole. That's the whole of it." Cole was crying openly now, this huge slab of a man, shoulders heaving and no sound coming out. "I know," he choked. "I know he did. I feel his hands on my collar every night when I close my eyes. That's why I could never look at the photo. That's why I never went looking for anyone from the unit. Never answered a single letter. I couldn't stand to be reminded that I'm walking around on a life that belongs to a better man." He looked up at her. "And you've been sitting in my office 2 years. Knowing all of it. Watching me sign work orders on the life your husband bought me." "Knowing all of it," she said. "Then why didn't you hate me?" His voice broke completely. "Why would you come find me? I'm the reason he's not in that chair instead of you. I'm the reason you're a widow. You should want me dead. You should have walked in here and spat in my face and told the whole world what I cost you." And this is the moment the whole thing turned on. This is the thing that broke Ironclad Vaughn all the way down. Della leaned forward. She took his big scarred hand in both of hers, the first time in 2 years either of them had touched, and she said, "Because that letter he never finished. The one the army sent back in the box with his boots and his tag. You want to know what the last line was? The last thing my husband ever wrote before he went out on that road." Cole couldn't speak. He just nodded. "He wrote, 'If anything happens to me, my girl, I need you to find a man named Cole Vaughn. He's got no family and he thinks that means nobody's coming for him. Somebody's got to look after him when I can't. Make sure he knows.'" She was crying too now and smiling through it both at once. "He never got to finish the sentence, Cole. Make sure he knows what we'll never know. The pen just stops. There's a little mark where it dragged off the page. But I decided a long time ago it didn't matter what came after. Make sure he knows somebody's coming for him. So I came. Ray sent me. I've been keeping his last promise for 2 years, 10 feet from your door, and you never even knew I was doing it." The office was silent except for the two of them, and the dog breathing on the floor. "That's why I fed that stray dog every night right when you did, and never said a word," she said, "because I've always known who you were. You're a man who takes care of everybody in this whole town and lets nobody take care of you. You keep half a bowl of scraps for a mutt with a torn ear because you can't stand to leave one more thing out in the cold. And you've been out in the cold yourself for 10 years and you won't let a single person near enough to warm you up." She squeezed his hand. "So I got near. Quiet on purpose. A little closer every month. And I waited. I figured one day you'd look up. I just never dreamed it'd take a red dress and 3 fools in the gravel to make you do it." Cole Vaughn, president of the Hells Angels, a man who'd buried friends and broken bones and stared down worse than any of us will ever see, put his head down on that office desk and wept like a child. And Della Hartwell got up out of her chair, and she came around that desk in her crimson dress, and she put her arms around him, and she held him while he shook. "I got jealous," he said into the dark of it. "I saw you in that dress and I thought some other man got what I never let myself even want, and I turned on you, in front of everyone. God, Della. I'm so sorry. It was never about another man, was it? It was me. I've been jealous of a ghost, jealous of my own guilt. I didn't even know that's what it was until you set that tag down." "I know," she said softly. "I've known that longer than you have. Now understand what was happening out in that yard while this went on. The men had heard the crash of that punch and gone still, and then the door had shut. And Tuck and Snake and the shaved head one stood in the gravel not saying a word, because whatever was happening in there, they knew they'd started it, and they knew, the way you know when you've stepped in something holy by accident, that they'd been fools their whole small lives and never more so than this morning. When the door finally opened near an hour later, the whole crew was still standing there, every one of them, waiting in the sun. Cole came out first. His eyes were red. He didn't try to hide it, and no man there dared to notice. Della came out behind him, and she'd fixed her face, and she stood tall in that red dress, and she was not the quiet lady with the ledgers anymore. Every man in that yard understood all at once that they'd never really seen her at all. They'd guarded a stranger for 2 years and called it a chore. Cole didn't yell. You know by now he never had to. He just looked at Tuck and Snake and the third one, and he said, "This woman is the widow of the man who died so I could stand here running my mouth at you today. He went into a fire for me. He never got to grow old. You put a hand on her sleeve this morning. You made her feel like meat in her own front yard on the worst day of her year. You will get down on your knees right now in the gravel, and you will apologize to her. And then you will spend the rest of your natural lives making sure not one hair on her head is ever troubled again. Do you understand me?" They got down in the gravel, all three. Big hard men on their knees in the heat, and they meant every word of it, and Della, God bless her, told each one of them to get up, that it was all right, that she forgave them, which was more than they deserved, and they knew it. Tuck couldn't even look at her. He just said, "Ma'am," over and over till the word ran out of meaning. Then Cole did something the crew had never once seen. He walked over to Della and he took her hand right there in front of everybody, gentle as anything, that same fist that had dented a truck an hour before now folded soft around her fingers. And he said, "Where's this memorial? I'm coming with you, if it's all right. I've got 10 years of things to say to Ray, and I've put it off long enough. I think I've been putting it off because I was afraid he'd be disappointed. But I don't want to be afraid of him anymore. He was my friend." Della's eyes filled up again. "He'd like that," she said. "He'd like that more than anything in this world." So the two of them drove out to the little cemetery on the north end of town. And Diesel rode in the back seat because Diesel came too, the way that dog always seemed to know exactly where he belonged. They stood at Ray Hartwell's stone in the terrible heat, the biker and the widow, and Cole Vaughn got down on one knee in the dry grass and finally, said the things he'd been choking on for a decade. He told Ray he was sorry. He told him thank you. He told him he'd been wasting the life Ray gave him, sitting alone, letting nobody in, building walls and calling them a business. And he told him, with Della standing right there with her hand on his shoulder, that he wasn't going to waste it anymore, not one more day of it. He set the dented dog tag down against the base of the stone. Then he thought better of it and he picked it back up and he handed it to Della. "You keep carrying him," he said. "You've done it beautiful for 10 years, but you're not carrying him alone anymore. That's the part I can do. That's the part I owe. From here on, we carry him together." They stood there a long while. The sun went lower and the heat let up, just a little, the way it does in the desert when evening finally decides to come. And Della slipped her arm through Cole's, and they walked back to the car with that dog trotting ahead of them. And for the first time in a very long time, neither one of them was out in the cold. "Now here's what I want to leave you with." Cole Vaughn thought his jealousy was about a woman in a red dress and some man he'd never met. He shouted a mean little question across a yard because he was sure the answer would break his heart. And he was right that it would break something. He was just wrong about what. The dress was never for a rival. It was for a man who ran into a fire so Cole could grow old. And the woman he'd been guarding at arm's length for 2 years hadn't wandered into his life by accident. She'd been sent by a dying man's last unfinished sentence to make sure Cole Vaughn knew that somebody somewhere was still coming for him. Make sure he knows. That was the sentence Ray never got to finish. And in the end, a jealous question and a red dress and a dented old dog tag finished it for him. Because from that day forward, Cole knew. He knew he was loved. He knew he wasn't alone. And he knew that the price of the ordinary, decent, quiet life he'd been too ashamed to live had already been paid in full by a better man, so that he could go ahead and live it. He never yelled again the way he yelled that morning. He didn't need to. He had a woman in red beside him, and a stray dog with a torn ear, and a promise he finally understood he was allowed to keep. Sometimes the hardest man in the room is just the loneliest one, and sometimes all it takes to save him is somebody willing to sit 10 feet away, quiet and patient, and wait for him to finally look up.